There are wounds that do not arise from the actions of others, but from the way we look at ourselves over the years. The deepest pain comes not from the loss itself, but from the doubt that we were to blame for it. Many mothers who feel distant from their children carry not only the pain of that distance, but also the invisible weight of a guilt that was never verbalized. It is not just the child's silence that hurts. It is one's own inner silence, which for so long tried to be strong. Carl Jung wrote that true healing only begins when a person is willing to acknowledge their shadow, not to fight it, but to integrate it. For a mother with a wounded heart, this means not waiting for forgiveness that comes from the outside, but making peace with herself. And this path does not manifest in grand revelations, but begins in small, almost invisible signs. The first silent sign that you are healing emotionally is when you begin to forgive yourself for the woman you were when you had no other choice. For many years, you may have compared yourself to an internal ideal, to the image of the mother who knows everything, gives everything, endures everything. An image that never truly existed, but that accompanied you like a silent witness in every failure, in every moment of exhaustion, in every argument where you shouted when all you really wanted was to be heard. This idealization is not an act of love, but a construction of the collective unconscious, a cultural figure that knows no mistakes, who always sacrifices, always smiles, and never doubts. Jung called these internal images archetypes, collective representations stronger than any logic. The good mother is one of these archetypes. However, it is precisely this myth that destroys the self-image of women who carry humanity within them, not infallibility. When you begin to heal, something transformative happens. You recognize that you were not perfect, and at the same time that you did not need to be. You stop looking at your past self with accusing eyes and begin to see it with a compassionate inner gaze. You understand that amidst the overload, the loneliness, and the fulfillment of duties, you were not a bad mother. You were a woman who gave everything she could give at that moment. The shadow Jung speaks of is not the evil within you. It is the unlived, the repressed, the unrecognized. Your anger, your exhaustion, your silent resentment. They were not the opposite of love. They were the expression of your humanity. And when you begin to reconcile with these internal parts, what emerges is not an idealization, but the truth. You no longer need to pass judgment on yourself. You do not need justifications, only the courage to leave behind the image of the saintly mother and embrace the image of the real woman, the one who loved even when she was not loved back, the one who stayed even when she wanted to leave, the one who forgot herself so that others could feel safe. And it is in this act of letting go that the second sign appears. You stop wanting to save others and start listening to yourself again. It is a deep-seated reflex for many wounded mothers to continue making themselves indispensable. Even if your child no longer asks if you are okay, you continue to ask. Even when you are ignored, you continue to see. It is not a conscious decision, but an unconscious mechanism. As long as you are giving, you remain in a relationship. As long as you are caring, you do not have to feel your own emptiness. However, a moment comes when the very act of helping becomes the source of exhaustion. You realize that you no longer want to be strong all the time. You no longer want to function. You simply want to be silent. Not because you are closing yourself off, but because you feel that your inner ear has forgotten how to listen to itself. Jung described the self as the center of the psyche, beyond all roles and masks. When you begin to heal, the identification with the role of savior dissolves. You stop paying attention to the outside world and begin to notice the subtle sound of your own needs again. Perhaps it is a quiet sound, perhaps fragile, but it is real. This is not an escape. It is a return to the voice you silenced for years so as not to disappoint anyone. And in this return, there is no guilt, but a new form of responsibility, no longer for others, but for yourself. A third silent sign that your soul is healing. You allow sadness to reach you without hiding from it anymore. For a long time, it was your enemy, this silent sadness that would sometimes nestle in your chest when you were alone in the kitchen. You pushed it away, disguised it, repressed it, because as a mother, you learn early on that there is no time for this soft part of existence, that grief is unproductive, it is weakness, it is self-pity, and you wanted to be strong for everyone, for your child, for the image they had of you, and perhaps even for yourself. But at some point, this protection breaks, not with a loud crash, but in a moment of emptiness. You are sitting on the sofa, the television is on, but you do not hear it. A thought crosses your mind, and suddenly the tears flow, not dramatically nor loudly, just silently. And you realize that you are not crying because you are breaking, but because you finally no longer have to fight. Carl Jung said, "The unconscious does not come as an idea, but as a feeling. Your sadness is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign, a call from your soul that has been ignored for too long, an echo of experiences that were too heavy to carry and too deep to forget. And now that you have stopped running, it can exist, not as a catastrophe, but as a purification. In sadness lies the truth, not the truth of the mind, but that of inner recognition. You recognize what you missed, what was never said, what was lost, not through arguments, but through gradual silencing. And you understand, your tears are not the end. They are the beginning of a new inner space where you no longer have to hide anything. The child within you, that central archetypal image in Jung, can finally be welcomed, not by someone outside, but by you. It is in sadness that this welcoming happens, an internal embrace of what you were before you sacrificed all your needs to be someone's mother. And when this space opens up, another sign follows almost naturally, a fourth silent sign of healing. You begin to observe your reactions with a compassionate gaze instead of the old internal judgment. Before, the criticism came immediately. A wrong word, a moment of impatience, an impulse, and soon you felt guilty in your own eyes. Perhaps you internalized a voice that never validated you, perhaps that of a mother, a father, a society that always demanded but rarely asked how you were. This voice was severe, harsh, and lived in you like a judge who never rests. But now you begin to gain distance. You still hear this voice, but you no longer believe it blindly. You observe, you recognize patterns. You no longer ask yourself, "What's wrong with me?" logically, but rather, What touched me? What in me wanted to be seen? Jung spoke of the realization of the I as the path to wholeness. And this awareness does not happen in theory, but precisely in these moments. When you no longer act on impulse, when you pause, when you breathe instead of condemning yourself, when you become curious about yourself instead of diminishing yourself, you recognize that your anger was not destructive, but a cry for boundaries. Your fatigue was not a failure, but an alarm signal. Your silence was not indifference, but protection. You were not wrong. You were exhausted, and nobody saw it, not even you. Now, you are beginning to see yourself, not only in your strength, but also in your fragility. And you realize that in this new perspective, there is something that for a long time you only offered to others: understanding. Understanding for your past self, for the woman who carried so much weight because she thought she had to, for the mother who was often alone with feelings no one wanted to hear. You are beginning to become a friend to yourself, not because you were perfect, but because you finally no longer have to be what others expect. And then something happens that surprises you. A fifth silent sign. You become less useful to others and more whole for yourself. It is not a planned withdrawal, nor a decision to retreat. It is a movement of the soul that begins silently. Before you answered messages immediately, you were ready to help, even when exhausted. You gave, organized, supported, because it was your role, your identity. But now you hesitate, not out of defiance, but out of clarity. You feel that not every request is a call for connection. Sometimes it is just another drop in a cup that has long since overflowed. You no longer say yes automatically. You no longer make yourself available by reflex. You begin to evaluate, do I really want this? Does this nourish me, or do I lose myself in it? For many mothers, this moment is challenging, as they learn that love is synonymous with self-sacrifice, that their value derives from their usefulness. But in reality, this has always been an illusion, a trade that negotiated one's own dignity for a false sense of belonging. Carl Jung called this the false self, the masks we wear to be loved. They emerge early, often in childhood, and infiltrate all relationships, especially the role of a mother. For in society, what is a mother if not the symbol of unconditional availability? Now, however, you are beginning to recognize the mask and no longer need every favor as proof of your existence. You are beginning to find yourself again in moments of inactivity, not as a loss, but as a recovery. This does not mean you are pulling away. It means you are gathering yourself together. You do not give less love, but it is no longer stained by guilt. You do not help less, but you no longer help to save yourself. Some relationships change because of this. People who only knew you as the one who never reacted might pull away. Empty spaces appear. But it is in these spaces that room for you emerges, and you realize that you need less than you imagined. You do not need to be constantly needed. You no longer need to prove that you are important. You already are, even without requests, even without a stage. In Jung's psychology, this is the moment when individuation begins, the detachment from the collective image, from one's own role. You become yourself, no longer just a mother, no longer just a function, but a person, a woman, a soul. Perhaps you become less present in the eyes of others, but you become visible to your own eyes. You emerge from the shadow of expectations, and what awaits you there is not loneliness, but dignity. It is looking in the mirror in the morning without thinking about obligations. It is sitting in silence without feelings of guilt. It is breathing in and out with the knowledge that you do not need to please anyone. I can simply be, and in this simplicity lies the greatest revolution. For nothing is more radical in a world of duties than a woman who allows herself to be internally whole, without needing to accomplish something to deserve it. When all these signs unfold within you, a sudden transformation does not occur. There is no single day when everything becomes different, nor a definitive, "now I am healed." It is more like an internal silencing of those voices that diminished you, a gradual awakening into a space that was always there but was never fully inhabited. You begin to inhabit yourself, not as a guest in your own life, but as someone who finds the key again after a long absence. You settle into your story, your voice, your skin. Jung said, "That which we do not make conscious manifests in our lives as fate." And it is exactly this that is now reversed. What was once a pain that dominated you now becomes a part of you that you can carry. Not because it became lighter, but because you became stronger by accepting it, not by repressing it. Perhaps nothing has changed externally. Perhaps your child remains distant. Perhaps no letter arrives, no call, no belated thank you. But now you know. Your dignity does not depend on it. You have seen yourself. You have begun to support yourself in the moments when no one else did. And this is not a small gesture. It is an internal act of self-respect that changes everything. Healing does not happen because the past disappears. It happens because you learn to make a place for it, not as a burden, but as a room in your inner house, a space you no longer lock, but which you slowly fill with light. Perhaps what remains in the end is not a grand reconciliation, nor a movie-worthy new beginning, but something much purer, a silent knowledge that you did not lose yourself despite everything, and that every tear, every silence, every decision to listen to yourself was a step, not backward, but toward yourself. If you identify with these words, if you have felt one of these 5 signs on your own journey, I invite you to share something with us, not to explain yourself, but to be heard. Write in the comments what you have managed to leave behind or what you are just beginning to feel. And if you feel that this journey is not yet over, subscribe to this channel. Here, it is not about solutions, but about companionship, about words that are not louder than your pain, but quiet enough to reach it. Because true healing happens where you finally stop waiting for external redemption and begin to embrace yourself. Not because you were perfect, but because you survived.